It's fair to say that the 21st century is relatively low on truly statuesque horror villains who can live up to the genre's classics, like Halloween's Michael Myers, Friday the 13th's Jason Voorhees, A Nightmare on Elm Street's Freddy Krueger, Child's Play's Chucky, and so on. But every so often, creative filmmakers strike gold and give us a villain who joins the pantheon of the greats, whether due to their novel motivation, brutal method of killing, neat design, or the performance of the actor playing them. Over the last near 25 years, these are the horror movie villains who have ruled the genre and proved to us all that horror is absolutely capable of still crafting new antagonists to stand tall among the most beloved greats. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Horror, and here are the 10 most iconic horror movie villains of the 21st century. Number 10, John Kramer, Saw. Right, let's kick things off with perhaps the most iconic horror villain of the last quarter century, John Kramer, aka Jigsaw from the Saw franchise. The big hook of the Saw movies is that Jigsaw isn't merely another supernatural monster listlessly slashing up his victims. He's a flesh and blood person who wants to test people's will to live. That is to say, while Jigsaw is undeniably a mass murderer, despite his own deluded claims to the contrary, some of his victims have survived their encounters with him. The sick creativity of Jiggy's various traps helped prop the series up even during its lesser installments. But what would the franchise really be without Tobin Bell's fantastically ominous performance as Kramer? And his iconic utterance of the phrase, "I wanna play a game"? Not as good, that's what. It's also impressive that Kramer has had so much staying power with audiences despite being killed off way back in Saw 3 almost 20 years ago. Enough that he was brought back for the shockingly good interquel Saw 10 last year. Or Saw X, whatever it is. In fact, Kramer's such an incredible character that the series has basically struggled to create a worthy successor to him ever since his demise. And so, when an 82-year-old Bell eventually ages out of the role, the filmmakers will definitely have some tough decisions to make. How do you replace a goat? Right, so quick question for you. Who is your favorite horror villain of all time? It doesn't just have to be the 21st century, just all of them, all out there. Who's your favorite? Let me know in the comments, my friends. Number 9, Death, Final Destination. A few years before Jigsaw graced our screens, though, there was death itself picking off those who attempted to cheat its well-laid plans in Final Destination. Death is the only villain on this list who doesn't have a consistent physical form, instead existing as an unseen entity who manipulates circumstances from behind the scenes to ensure that its intended victims meet their grisly end. The fun of the Final Destination movies is, of course, the myriad imaginatively gory ways in which its hapless victims are dispatched, packed with misdirects and darkly comedic outcomes. It's a formula that allowed the franchise to thrive, even though the ultimate outcome proved predictable most of the time, death prevailing. Because it's the one thing nobody can escape. It's gonna get us all in the end. Hopefully, the upcoming 6th film won't do anything to mess with death's conception as an eerily invisible force nudging people towards their near-inevitable fates. Number 8, Annabelle the Conjuring. Though it's a little disappointing that the Conjuring franchise never went full Child's Play with possessed doll Annabelle, it is tough to deny her inherently creepy presence from the original Conjuring onward. Given that she appeared for just a cup of coffee in the first Conjuring, it's a testament to her primal eeriness that she's become a mainstay of the series ever since, even making cameo appearances in other films helmed by Conjuringverse filmmakers James Wan and David F. Sandberg. Smartly redesigned from the real Raggedy Ann version of the doll, though that doll still creeps me out, Annabelle's piercing eyes and creepily knowing smile immediately made her a hit with horror fans, even if her own trilogy of spin-offs is a relatively mixed bag overall. If Valak, aka The Nun, has become the Conjuring series boogeyman in recent years, it is Annabelle who immediately sent chills down the spines of horror fans within the first few minutes of the first movie. Without her, who knows where the franchise would be right now. Number 7, the Babadook. The Babadook. The Babadook is a terrifying humanoid entity that serves as an embodiment of protagonist Amelia's grief, anxiety, and depression following the sudden death of her husband, as she struggles to raise her young son solo. Though the last decade of horror has well and truly worn out the monster equals trauma trope, the Babadook was certainly ahead of the curve. and with its scant $2 million budget, had to get scrappy with its presentation of the creature, relying on handmade practical effects and clever in-camera tricks to terrify the audience. And oh boy were they terrified. What's perhaps most surprising about the Babadook is how he stuck around in the cultural conversation for so long, becoming an internet meme and even more unexpectedly an icon for the LGBTQ+ community, after Netflix accidentally mislabeled the film as a work of queer cinema. Now the Babadook is still talked about 10 years later is even more impressive considering that it's a one-and-done movie with no sequels, spin-offs, or much of a wider media empire. That stuff just doesn't happen, really. Number 6. Cloverfield. Truly statuesque movie monsters have been surprisingly tough to come by this century so far, with Hollywood largely leaning back on the ever-fertile well of Godzilla and King Kong. But 2008 did give us a creature who has remained popular ever since. The giant alien monster from Cloverfield, nicknamed Clover. Ah, cute. A big part of Cloverfield's success was a result of its ingenious marketing campaign, which concealed Clover's presence entirely, while focusing instead on the utter destruction the creature was capable of causing. But his big reveal in the final film certainly lives up to all the hype, his intriguingly grotesque design and terrifying power combining to instantly cement him as an all-timer movie monster. You don't mess with Clover. Though it is fair to say that little of real interest has been done with Clover as a character since the original film, it is honestly just a greater testament to his effectiveness that he continues to fascinate so many. If you want some more horror in your life, then hit that subscribe button down below, and that is precisely what you'll get with more What Culture horror videos. Number 5. Megan. While it might seem a little hasty to include a 2023 horror villain on this list, the immediate impact and influence that Megan has had is simply undeniable. Though many expected the film to simply be a high-tech riff on Child's Play, Megan made a distinct star out of its titular overprotective AI doll, in large part due to the movie's sharp refusal to take itself too seriously. Couple Megan's fantastically uncanny design with her scary, soothing voice, and the efficient means with which she can dismantle a human body, perhaps while giddily dancing along the way. And it's no surprise at all that she became a viral social media phenom before the movie itself was even released. I had that dance down before I'd even seen it. That the final film largely lived up to the online commotion was quite the surprise, really, ensuring that Megan has remained a genre mainstay in the near 2 years since the movie's release, with a sizable legion of fans avidly anticipating next year's sequel, Megan 2.0. Number 4. Sam Trick or Treat. Trick or Treat may be by far the most niche horror movie on this list, but Michael Dougherty's cult classic anthology film has remained popular with horror fans for more than 15 years, in large part due to its fantastic central mascot, Sam. Sam, short for Samhain naturally, has minor appearances in the anthology's first 3 stories before taking center stage for his own tale, where he acts as a force who upholds the traditions of All Hallows Eve by any means necessary, punishing those who disrespect it in brutal fashion. First and foremost, Sam's design is absolutely incredible. Initially presented as a disarmingly adorable trick-or-treater who harbors a decidedly scarier mug underneath that burlap sack. Not a pretty chap. Sam is undeniably the primary reason that this horror film that grossed just $27,909 at the box office has remained popular for so long, becoming an icon in his own right and arguably being more recognizable than the movie he spawned from. Number 3. The Horde, Split and Glass. M. Night Shyamalan's Split arrived amid relatively low expectations, but to the filmmaker's credit, he ended up delivering one of the most memorably terrifying and intense characters from any horror or thriller film of the past decade. Much of the praise must also go to James McAvoy, though, for his performance as Kevin Wendell Crumb, a man with dissociative identity disorder who can switch between 24 separate identities, is basically what makes the movie as good as it is. McAvoy does an outstanding job of making the various personalities within the Horde feel genuinely distinct, enough that audiences were thoroughly excited to see more of him in action in sequel Glass. I know I was. And while Glass ultimately fell far short of most fans' expectations, including mine, Elise McAvoy once again gave a visceral and wholly plausible performance in the role, enough to ensure the Horde's place as a genre icon regardless of how disappointing his eventual fate was. Number 2, Art the Clown, Terrifier. In terms of recent horror icons, there's none more undeniable than Terrifier's Art the Clown. Back when the character first appeared in Damien Leone's 2008 short The Ninth Circle, as well as 2013's anthology film All Hallows Eve and 2016's Terrifier, who could have ever anticipated that the deranged clown would become a genuine global phenomenon? Though the first Terrifier was a modest box office success per its low budget, the film picked up serious steam with horror fans on streaming, with many pointing to the colourful presence of art as brought to darkly comedic life by the brilliant David Howard Thornton. Just look at him go. By the time Terrifier 2 came out, Art was already a hugely popular character, and the recent Terrifier 3 confirmed him to indeed be the closest thing modern horror has ever had to its own Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, or Freddy Krueger. Number 1, the lipstick-faced demon, Insidious. Sure, we've all made jokes about how he looks like Darth Maul, but there is no denying the pulse-quickening screen presence of Insidious' overarching antagonist, the lipstick-faced demon, aka the man with the fire in his face. Nobody who's ever seen James Wan's original entry will forget the all-timer jump scare where he appears behind Josh Lambert, instantly propelling the character into the pantheon of legendary 21st century horror icons, and making it hard for me to sleep that night. While it's fair to say that Wan's presentation of the entity sometimes verged on silly, especially in the original film's third act, this demonic resident of the further is the unassailable mascot of the Insidious franchise, and one of the most statuesque, recognizable horror villains of the last 25 years. And here's a fun final fact for you. Since his inception, the lipstick-faced demon has been played by Joseph Bishara, who also happens to be the composer of the Insidious franchise. So yeah, now you know.